During our family vacation, my daughter-in-law screamed at the hotel receptionist, "Don't talk to that old woman. She's just the maid." My son burst out laughing. She had no idea I was the owner of the place, and what I did next left her trembling. "I'm glad you're here listening. Stay with me until the end, and tell me which city you're listening from." I had been waiting for this trip for months. At 72, chances to spend time with my son, Joseph Miller, and his family were rare. When Joseph suggested we spend a week together on the California coast, my heart filled with excitement. Maybe, I thought, I could finally grow closer to my daughter-in-law, Victoria, who had kept her distance throughout their 5 years of marriage. The long drive to the luxury seaside paradise passed with Joseph and Victoria chatting about spa treatments, golf tee times, and expensive dinners, as if I wasn't even there. Every time I tried to join the conversation asking about the kids or suggesting something we could all do together, Victoria replied curtly, while Joseph ignored me completely. I should have noticed the warning signs, but my longing for family closeness made me look past them. Seaside Paradise was one of my proudest achievements, though my family had no idea. After my husband died when Joseph was 12, I built my hotel business from nothing. I started with a small bed and breakfast, working 18 hours a day, scrubbing floors, managing bookings, and slowly expanding until I owned 17 properties across 3 states. I always kept business and family separate because I wanted Joseph to love me for who I was, not for what I had. When our car pulled up to the main gate, I couldn't help but feel pride as I saw the perfectly trimmed gardens and the uniformed valets rushing to greet guests. It had taken me 3 years to buy Seaside Paradise and 2 more to renovate it until it was perfect. Every detail, from the marble floors to the crystal chandeliers, was handpicked by me. Joseph handed the car keys to the valet while Victoria adjusted her designer sunglasses, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She was beautiful in that way that only comes from regular spa appointments and personal trainers. At 35, 20 years younger than Joseph, she made sure no one ever forgot it. "Remember," she told him as we approached the doors, "I want the penthouse. I don't care what they say about it being booked. Make it happen." Joseph nodded without hesitation. It still hurt to see the confident boy I raised turn into a man who couldn't act without his wife's approval. As we entered the grand lobby, I couldn't help but smile at the familiar hum of activity. Amelia Carter, the front desk manager, looked up and her eyes widened when she saw me. I gave her a slight nod. I wasn't ready for anyone to know who I really was. "Good afternoon," Amelia greeted warmly, keeping her professional tone. "Welcome to Seaside Paradise. How may I help you?" "Reservation under Miller," Joseph said. "We should have the penthouse." Amelia's fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. "Yes, Mr. Miller, I see your reservation. You're confirmed for our deluxe seaside suite, but the penthouse is fully booked for the entire week." Victoria's expression hardened, her jaw tightening as anger flared in her perfectly made-up eyes. "That's unacceptable. Do you even know who we are?" "I specifically requested the penthouse when I made the reservation." Amelia remained calm, though her shoulders tensed slightly. "I'm so sorry for the confusion, Mrs. Miller. The deluxe suite is beautiful and includes a private balcony. I don't want to hear about some second-rate room," Victoria snapped, loud enough for nearby guests to turn and stare. "I want the penthouse, and I want it now." I stepped forward, hoping to ease the tension, but she spun toward me, her face twisted with fury. "Don't you dare speak," she shouted, her voice echoing off the marble walls. "You, the receptionist, or whatever your name is, ignore anything this old woman says. She's nobody. Just the help we brought along." The entire lobby went silent. Heat burned across my cheeks as humiliation washed over me, but Victoria wasn't done. "Don't talk to her," she added, pointing at me like I was something filthy. "She's just the maid, the nanny. Don't waste your time." I stood frozen, my mouth dry, my heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs would crack. In 72 years, no one had ever spoken to me with such venom, especially not in front of strangers. But what cut even deeper was hearing Joseph laugh, not awkwardly, not nervously, but with genuine amusement, as if watching his wife humiliate his mother was the funniest thing in the world. "Oh, Victoria," he chuckled between breaths, wiping tears from his eyes. "You're awful, but you're not wrong. Mom, just let us handle this, okay? Go sit somewhere." His words hit like a punch. This was the boy I'd raised alone, the child I'd worked myself to exhaustion for, the one I'd sacrificed everything to give a better life. And now he was laughing at my disgrace. Amelia's face had turned pale, a mix of shock and pity that only deepened my pain. Around us, I heard whispers and saw phones, raised people recording the scene. "Ma'am," Amelia said softly, still professional but visibly shaken, "perhaps you'd like to wait in our lounge while we sort this out." Victoria let out a dramatic sigh. "Yes, take her somewhere out of sight so she doesn't embarrass us anymore. Make sure someone keeps an eye on her, she tends to wander off." Joseph laughed again while I stood there, my heart splintering. I wanted to disappear, to escape that elegant lobby, my cruel daughter-in-law, my mocking son. But deep inside me, a small spark, the same strength, that had built my empire from nothing kept me standing tall. I caught Amelia's eye. She knew. One word from me, and Victoria would be escorted out before her heels even touched the marble floor. But I stayed silent. I picked up my small suitcase and walked toward the elevator with my back straight, even as humiliation pressed down on me. As the doors closed, I met Amelia's gaze one last time. She nodded faintly, a silent promise that she understood and would be waiting for my signal. I had built this empire from scratch, giving work to more than 300 employees. In the business world, I was respected, admired for my fairness and integrity. But in that lobby, I was nothing more than a pathetic old woman, ridiculed by her own family. As the elevator rose to the 12th floor, the pain remained sharp, but something else began to stir determination. The next morning, I woke in my ocean view suite, where gentle waves brushed the shore beneath a golden sunrise. It should have been peaceful, but I felt hollow. I hadn't slept much. Victoria's sneering words, "She's just the maid," still echoed in my mind, along with Joseph's laughter, replaying like a cruel melody. A soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. I opened the door to find Joseph standing there, awkward but not at all remorseful. "Mom, let's grab breakfast. Victoria wants you to watch the kids by the pool afterward so we can hit the spa." No good morning, no apology, not even a hint of recognition for what had happened in the lobby. "Joseph," I said quietly, "about last night." He waved his hand dismissively. "Mom, don't make a big deal out of it. Victoria was just stressed about the room. You know how she gets when things don't go as planned." That's what he called it, stress. "She called me a maid, Joseph. She screamed at me in front of everyone." He avoided my eyes. "She didn't mean it. She just overreacted. Can we not talk about this? We're supposed to be on vacation." I looked at him, searching for the boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who once called me the strongest person in the world. But that boy was gone, replaced by a 55-year-old man who chose his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity. "Fine," I said, tasting bitterness in my mouth. "I'll watch the kids." He smiled. relieved. Perfect. We'll probably be gone most of the day, spa, lunch, maybe some shopping. You don't mind, right? Of course I minded. I had hoped this trip would bring us closer, that I'd spend time with my grandkids and feel part of the family again. Instead, I'd been reduced to an unpaid babysitter. But I just nodded. I'd learned long ago that sometimes silence kept the peace better than words. The breakfast hall was packed with vacationers. Victoria had secured the best table by the window and was barking orders at the staff like she owned the place. I want fresh orange juice, not that awful bottled stuff. She snapped at the young waiter Raymond, a server I recognized from previous visits. And make sure the eggs are cooked all the way through. Exactly on the dot, not a second more, not a second less. I could see Raymond trying to stay calm, but the tension in his eyes betrayed him. I had trained my staff to deliver top-tier service, but Victoria was testing even his patience. My grandchildren, Luna and Edward, 8 and 10, sat silently at the table, eyes glued to their tablets. They barely looked up when I approached. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said to Luna, reaching to smooth her hair, but Victoria's hand shot out to stop me. "Don't touch her. She just had her hair done yesterday, and I don't want it ruined." I pulled my hand back as if I'd touched a hot stove. Luna didn't even glance away from her screen. "Kids, say good morning to Grandma Laura," Joseph mumbled without interest. "Good morning," they echoed together, eyes still fixed on their tablets. I sat in the only remaining chair, the one facing away from the ocean view. Victoria had made sure her family got the best seats, leaving me the leftover one like an afterthought. "Laura," Victoria said without looking at me, "after breakfast, take the kids to the pool. Apply sunscreen every hour. Luna burns easily, and if she even turns pink, that's on you." I nodded, swallowing back the words I wanted to say. "Keep them away from the deep end, and don't let them snack by the pool. Junk food is full of preservatives. Oh, and if they need anything at all, call me right away. Don't try to handle it yourself." Each order felt like a tiny cut, another reminder she didn't trust me to care for my own grandchildren. "How long will you be at the spa?" I asked. Victoria finally looked up, her eyes cold. "As long as we want. This is our vacation, not yours. You're here to help." Joseph remained silent, eyes glued to his phone. I wondered when he'd become the kind of man who let his wife treat his mother like hired help. After breakfast, I took Luna and Edward to the pool, trying to make conversation while they stayed lost in their screens. Around us, other families laughed, splashed, and enjoyed each other's company. We looked like strangers sharing the same space. "Grandma," Luna said suddenly. My heart skipped. Maybe she wanted to talk. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Mom says you used to clean houses for rich people. Is that true?" The question hit me like a slap. I'd worked hard my entire life. I'd never cleaned anyone's house. I'd built an empire from the ground up. I created jobs for hundreds of people and earned respect in an industry dominated by men. And yet, in Victoria's twisted version of my life, I was just a maid. I smiled softly. "No, honey. I own hotels. I build them." Edward finally looked up from his tablet for the first time that morning. "Mom says you make up stories about being important because you're embarrassed about being poor." The cruelty in his words stole my breath. Victoria hadn't just humiliated me in public, she'd poisoned my grandchildren against me, filling their minds with lies so they'd see me as a delusional old woman. "Your grandma isn't poor, and she doesn't make up stories," I said firmly. Luna shrugged. "That's what Mom says. She says you live in a tiny apartment and pretend to be rich to feel better about yourself. In reality, I lived in a penthouse overlooking the bay worth more than most people's entire net worth. But to them, I was a pathetic old woman living in poverty, lying about her life. For hours I sat by that pool, watching two children who barely glanced my way while their parents enjoyed themselves. A few guests made small talk, and I smiled politely in return, all the while feeling emptier with every passing minute. When Joseph and Victoria returned, they were glowing after hours at the spa and an expensive lunch. Victoria's nails were freshly done, her hair perfect. She looked like someone who had spent the entire day being pampered, which, of course, she had, at my own spa, with services I paid for. "How were the kids?" Joseph asked without looking up from his phone. "They were fine," I said. What else could I have said? That they thought I was a liar, a maid, someone their mother had turned against me? "Good," Victoria replied absently. "You'll watch them again tomorrow. We've got golf in the morning and lunch with some new friends from the spa." I glanced at my son, who nodded in agreement without even asking if I wanted to. He didn't think for a second that maybe I'd like to enjoy my own vacation instead of playing free babysitter. That night, sitting alone in my room overlooking the ocean I had worked so hard to afford, the truth finally hit me. This wasn't a family vacation. It was a business trip where I'd been cast as the help, except I was paying to be treated like garbage. Sitting in the dark, listening to the waves crash against the shore, something inside me shifted. The pain was still there, deeper than ever. But now, it was joined by something sharper anger. Anger at being disrespected, deceived, and treated as if I were nothing when I was the one who had built everything. I decided that starting tomorrow, things would be different. The third morning began like the two before it. Victoria read off a list of instructions for me, while Joseph nodded along like a dutiful assistant. They were planning to visit a nearby wine region, leaving me behind with the kids. "Remember to feed them right at noon," Victoria said, applying lipstick with the precision of a surgeon. "Luna gets cranky when she's hungry, so keep a granola bar ready. I packed some." I wanted to remind her that I had raised a child once, that I knew how to care for kids. But I had learned that standing up for myself only earned me longer lectures and sharper insults. "We'll probably be back around 6, Joseph said, eyes glued to his phone. "Maybe later if there's traffic." As they gathered their things, I overheard Victoria on the phone, her tone syrupy and fake, thinking she was being discreet. "No, I can't meet tonight," she said. "I'm stuck babysitting." "Yeah, I know, hilarious. But it's just for a few more days. Trust me, once everything's settled, we won't have to deal with this anymore." A chill ran through me. The way she said, "once everything's settled," didn't sound like she was talking about the vacation ending. After they left, I took the kids to the hotel's Kids Club, a program I had personally created to help families enjoy more flexibility during their stays. The staff who cared for Luna and Edward were wonderful. For the first time since arriving, I saw them laugh and play with other children. With a few hours to myself, I decided to walk around the property. It had been years since I'd seen my hotel through the eyes of a guest rather than an owner, and I wanted to truly observe how things were running. That was when I heard a conversation that changed everything. As I passed the pool bar, a familiar voice drifted from one of the private cabanas. Joseph and Victoria were supposed to be in wine country, but there they were, hidden behind the curtains, talking quietly with another couple. "The thing is," Victoria said, "she's getting old, and old people don't live forever, if you know what I mean." A woman giggled. "Victoria, you're terrible." "I'm realistic," Victoria replied. "Joseph's an only child, so everything will be ours soon enough. The only question is how long we have to wait." My stomach turned cold. I moved closer, staying hidden behind a tall palm. "What about Mrs. Miller?" a man asked. "She doesn't have her own money." Then I heard my son's voice, the same voice I once trusted with my life. "My mother? Of course not. She's broke. Lives in some tiny apartment, surviving off Social Security." For years, I had helped my son financially, and now lies rolled off his tongue so easily that I wondered how long he had been practicing them. I lived in a penthouse worth over $3 million. My monthly income from investments alone was more than most people earned in a year. Yet in Joseph's twisted version of reality, I was a burden he was generously supporting. "That's why this trip has been exhausting," Victoria continued. "We have to drag her everywhere because she can't pay for anything herself. It's like caring for a sad little pet you can't get rid of." The woman beside her made a pitying face. "That's awful for you. I bet she expects you to take care of her when she gets old." "Not as long as I'm alive," Victoria said with a cruel laugh. "When she really needs help, I'll put her in a nursing home. I'm not turning my house into a shelter for a useless old woman." I gripped the palm tree trunk to keep from collapsing. They weren't just talking about letting me die alone. They were planning to discard me the moment I became inconvenient. But what Joseph said next broke me completely. "The funny thing is, she still thinks she matters," he said, his voice dripping with amusement. "She tells these ridiculous stories about running a business and being successful. It's actually pathetic." "Is she senile?" the man asked. "Maybe," Joseph replied. "Or maybe she just wants to believe she still has value. Either way, it's embarrassing. Yesterday she told the kids she owns a hotel chain. A hotel chain. Can you believe that?" Laughter exploded around the table, and every note of it cut through me like shattered glass. "At least," Victoria added, "we won't have to listen to her nonsense much longer. I give her 5 years, 10 at most. Then we'll finally be free, no more pretending to care. Just a useless old woman who's never done anything with her life." I stood frozen behind the tree, feeling the world collapse around me. This wasn't idle gossip about some distant relative. This was my son and his wife talking about my death like it was a long-awaited vacation. "The best part," Victoria went on, "is she's grateful for any scrap of attention like this trip. She thinks we invited her because we wanted her here. How pathetic. She doesn't even know we only brought her to babysit." Laughter filled the cabana again, light and merciless. "Did she at least pay for part of the trip?" the other woman asked. "Are you kidding?" Victoria scoffed. "She's useless with money. Joseph's paying for everything, the food, the rooms. Honestly, the whole trip's a burden." Another lie. Over the years, I'd helped Joseph financially, covering part of his mortgage, paying private school tuition for the kids, even settling some of Victoria's luxury shopping bills. The credit card statements that arrived at my address were staggering, but I always paid them, thinking I was supporting my family. "The only good thing about having her around," Joseph said, "is she's decent at watching the kids. Free childcare, you know. She's so desperate for our approval she'll do anything we ask." "It's kind of sad, really," Victoria added. "Watching her try to win us over, buying expensive gifts for the kids, always offering to help. It's pathetic but convenient." I'd heard enough. I stumbled away from the cabana, tears blurring my vision, but I refused to cry, not here, not where they could see. Back in my room, I finally let myself collapse onto the bed, the weight of it all crashing down. My son, the boy I raised alone after my husband died, the one I worked 18-hour days for, now saw me as nothing but dead weight. My daughter-in-law, who had smiled at me across family dinners for 5 years, saw me as free labor, a scapegoat for her own bitterness. And my grandchildren, innocent as they were, had been taught that their grandmother was a delusional liar. In that hotel room my hotel built with my money, my vision, and my labor, I realized I had spent a lifetime giving love and wealth to people who not only lacked gratitude, but resented me for it. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was the front desk. "Mrs. Miller, this is Amelia from reception. I'm sorry to bother you, but we just wanted to make sure you're okay. Some of the staff mentioned they were concerned about you." Her sincere voice from a stranger reminded me how deeply I'd longed for even a small act of kindness. "I'm fine, thank you, Amelia. Are you sure? Is there anything we can do to make your stay more comfortable?" I almost laughed at the irony. One of my employees, someone I paid to serve guests, was showing me more care than my own family ever had. "Actually, yes, Amelia," I said slowly. "Of course, ma'am. What do you need?" I took a deep breath, feeling the ground steady beneath me again. "I need a detailed report of every expense charged to my son's room, meals, services, everything. I want a full account." There was a pause. "Of course, Mrs. Miller. May I ask why?" "Let's just say I'm finally starting to see things clearly." After hanging up, I walked to the window. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and red, waves glittering under the fading light. For the first time in 3 days, I wasn't just looking, I was planning. My family thought I was some poor, useless old woman barely hanging on. They were about to find out who they'd really crossed. That evening, Joseph and Victoria returned from their so-called wine tour, skin sun-kissed, faces smug with satisfaction after a day built on lies. They strolled into the lobby like royalty, completely unaware that I had heard every word by the pool. "Mom," Joseph said when he saw me sitting with the kids, "how was your day? Hope the little ones didn't tire you out." Yesterday, I might have fallen for his fake concern. Now, I could hear the performance in every syllable. "The kids were wonderful," I replied calmly, though anger burned hot in my chest. "We had fun at the kids' club, didn't we?" Luna and Edward nodded vaguely, then turned back to their parents as if I didn't exist. "Perfect," Victoria said, still checking her reflection in her phone. "We're trying that new seafood place downtown tonight. You don't mind watching the kids, do you? They'll go to bed early anyway." It wasn't a question, it never was. "Of course," I said, the bitterness heavy on my tongue. Once they left, I returned to my room, closed the door, and dialed a number I hadn't called in. Years. "Michael, it's Laura Miller." Michael Harris had been my business attorney for 15 years, sharp enough to know both the law and how the world truly worked. If anyone could help me, it was him. "Laura," he greeted, warmth in his voice. "It's good to hear from you. How's retired life treating you?" I gave a small laugh. "Retired, hardly. I may have stepped back from daily operations, but I never stepped away." "Michael, I have a question. Let's say someone was using a credit card linked to my account without authorization. What would my legal options be?" He hesitated. "That sounds a little too specific to be hypothetical. Is something wrong?" "Let's just say I'm reassessing my financial structure. And if it's a family member with authorized access, but they're being dishonest about the spending?" "Laura, if someone's committing financial fraud with your credit card family or not, that's a criminal offense. Are you saying something like that is happening?" I looked out over the moonlit ocean. "I'm saying I'm tired of being taken advantage of, and I want to know my options." Over the next half hour, Michael walked me through everything I could do. It was both painful and liberating to hear. I had far more power than I'd realized, and Joseph and Victoria had made far more mistakes than they knew. After hanging up, I called Amelia at the front desk. "Mrs. Miller, how can I assist you?" she asked. "Amelia, I need you to prepare a detailed report every service my son's family has used since they arrived, every special request, every staff interaction." "Of course, ma'am." "Is there a particular reason?" I chose my words carefully. "Let's call it a customer service quality review. I just want to make sure everything is being handled properly." "I understand, ma'am. You'll have it by morning." The next morning the sky was heavy and gray, just like my mood. I'd barely slept, my head filled with plans, but for the first time in days, I felt focused instead of powerless. I met with Amelia early, before Joseph and Victoria even woke up. The report she handed me was worse than I imagined. "Your daughter-in-law has filed 17 complaints since she arrived," Amelia said softly, passing me the folder. "She demanded a room change, special meals, and has been rude to multiple staff members." I turned each page, reading every note about Victoria's arrogance, scolding housekeeping for how they arranged her shoes, returning 3 meals because they weren't perfect, even demanding the pool be cleared so Luna and Edward could swim alone. "And my son?" I asked quietly. Amelia kept her voice low. "He doesn't participate much, but he supports her in every complaint." Of course he did. Joseph had always been good at keeping his hands clean while letting his wife reveal the worst parts of herself. Amelia hesitated before continuing. "There's one more thing. Yesterday, when she thought no one could hear, Mrs. Victoria said a few things about how this hotel is run." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "She told another guest the service was decent but claimed the owner must be old money and out of touch with modern standards. She said she could run the place better herself." The irony would have been amusing if it hadn't cut so deep. "Thank you, Amelia. You've been more helpful than you realize." On my way back to my room, I ran into Raymond, the young waiter who'd served us at breakfast. He looked uneasy. "Mrs. Miller," he said quietly, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I want you to know the staff all see how your family treats you." I stopped walking. "What do you mean?" Raymond glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "We all know who you are, ma'am. You've always been kind to everyone here. But watching how they speak to you, how they act around you, it doesn't sit right with any of us." His loyalty moved me. These people had no obligation to defend me, yet they did. They respected me, believed in the fairness I'd built my name on. "Thank you, Raymond. That means more than you know." He nodded. "If there's anything we can do—" "Actually, there is," I said. "Keep treating them like valued guests, but document everything, every complaint, every word, every action. Can you handle that?" "Of course, ma'am." The next 2 days, I stopped being the silent observer. I became the woman who had built an empire by reading people's true nature. And what I saw was worse than I ever imagined. Victoria wasn't just arrogant, she was cruel. I watched her make a housekeeper cry because the towels weren't folded to her liking. I watched her explode when a poolside drink arrived a few minutes late, shouting at a young server who was doing his best. Joseph didn't stop her. He encouraged her. He laughed at her sharp words, added his own complaints, and treated my employees as if they were beneath him. But what finally shattered my patience was the way they treated their own children. I was sitting by the pool when Luna scraped her knee against the diving board. It was just a small cut, barely bleeding, but she cried out and ran toward us for comfort. When Victoria rushed over, she didn't comfort her daughter, she turned on the lifeguard, screaming that it was his fault for not preventing the accident. Then she spun toward me. "This is your fault. I told you to keep an eye on them. Maybe if you stopped daydreaming, this wouldn't have happened." Luna kept crying while her parents argued and blamed everyone but themselves. I knelt beside her, taking antiseptic and a bandage from the first aid kit, gently cleaning the wound and pressing a small kiss to her forehead. "You're okay, sweetheart." "You're so brave," I whispered. "Grandma," Luna sniffled. "Why? Doesn't Mommy like you?" The innocent question pierced through me like a blade. Even an 8-year-old could see what I had tried to pretend wasn't there, the open hatred Victoria had for me. Before I could answer, Victoria's voice cracked through the air like a whip. "Luna, get away from her right now. I told you not to go near that woman. She's not going to be around much longer anyway." The raw cruelty in her words, aimed at both me and her daughter, was the final straw. That night, I started making the phone calls that would change everything. I called Michael, this time with specific instructions. I contacted my accountant to pull financial records and reached out to John Preston, the general manager of my hotel chain, giving urgent directives. When I hung up the last call, I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked older than 72, worn down by days of humiliation and heartbreak, but in her eyes was something that had been missing for far too long: power and unshakable resolve. Tomorrow was the last day of the vacation. Joseph and Victoria thought it would be their final chance to boss me around like hired help. They had no idea that tomorrow they'd face the woman they had tried to crush. The morning dawned bright and still, the kind of flawless seaside day that ends up on postcards, convincing tourists to come back year after year. To me, it felt like mockery. Victoria had arranged a farewell dinner in the resort's most luxurious dining hall, the one with ocean views and a single night cost that could cover a month's rent for most families. Of course, she had no idea every dollar was coming straight from my own account. Joseph had piled up charges on the credit card I foolishly gave him access to. "Tonight's going to be perfect," Victoria said at breakfast, her voice full of self-importance. "I've invited some wonderful people we met this week, the Hendersons, the Martins, and that lovely couple from Boston." Joseph nodded proudly. "Sounds great, honey. Mom, can you watch the kids tonight? They get bored when grown-ups talk." Once again, I was pushed aside, assigned the role of unpaid babysitter while they enjoyed a lavish evening funded entirely by me. "Of course," I said calmly, though my mind was steel. All morning, I finalized the last details. Michael had worked through the night to make sure every legal document was airtight. John Preston had quietly notified everyone who needed to know the truth. I practiced what I was going to say until I could deliver it without trembling. That afternoon, I received one final call. "Mrs. Miller, this is Detective Anderson with the police department. We've reviewed the financial records your attorney provided, along with the fraud evidence. We're ready to proceed whenever you give the word." "Thank you, Detective. I'll call when it's time." The hours crawled by. Victoria spent the entire afternoon preparing, transforming herself into a vision of fake elegance. Joseph pressed his shirt, shined his shoes, ready to play the part of the successful businessman. Neither asked what I was wearing or if I needed help in their eyes. I was still just the help. At exactly 7 p.m., we walked into Horizon Hall, the most magnificent dining room in the resort. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed the endless ocean, while crystal chandeliers cast golden light over pristine white linens and fine porcelain plates. I had chosen every detail myself, from the murals to the imported marble floors. It was designed to host life's most beautiful moments. Tonight, it would host something entirely different. The guests were already seated, 6 elegant couples captivated by Victoria's fake charm and Joseph's false confidence. They greeted me with polite indifference before turning their attention back to the self-proclaimed power couple. "Everyone, this is Joseph's mother," Victoria said, lightly, her voice empty, like she was introducing an unimportant piece of furniture. Throughout dinner, she held court like a queen, talking endlessly about her travels and grand plans. Joseph played the doting husband, adding flattering details to make them seem wealthier than they were. I sat at the end of the table, helping Luna and Edward with their meals, keeping them quiet so the adults could enjoy their feast. Every time the kids spoke out of turn, Victoria shot me sharp looks, as if it were my fault they weren't perfect. Then, halfway through dinner, she spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Laura, could you take the kids out to the balcony? They're getting restless, and I don't want them disturbing our guests." That was the moment I'd been waiting for public humiliation, right on cue. I rose slowly, placed my napkin neatly on the table, and walked toward the head of the table, where Victoria sat in smug satisfaction, unaware that her world was seconds from collapsing. "Actually, Victoria," I said clearly, my voice carrying through the room, "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." The room went dead silent. Victoria turned to me, irritation flickering across her face. "What are you talking about?" I said. "Take the kids outside." "I know," I said evenly, standing behind her chair. "Just like I know what you said by the pool 3 days ago when you were talking about how long I'd live and how happy you'd be when I was finally gone." Her face drained of color, but she forced a weak laugh. "I have no idea what you're talking about. You must have misheard." I met her eyes. "Misheard? When you called me a useless old woman, I heard that loud and clear. Or maybe," I continued, "I also misheard you say you'd dump me in a state-run nursing home once I became a burden. Or perhaps I imagined my son laughing while saying I was delusional for claiming to own a business. Isn't that right, Joseph?" He stared at me, his face shifting from confusion to panic. Around the table, guests exchanged awkward glances, desperate to disappear. Joseph's voice shook, full of warning. "Mom, maybe we should talk about this privately." I didn't look at him. My eyes stayed locked on Victoria. "We've had enough private talks. Now it's time to speak in public." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder. The sound of paper filled the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice strong, "allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Laura Miller, and I am the owner and founder of Miller Hospitality Group." A wave of shock rippled through the room. One woman gasped, covering her mouth. "This hotel, the Seaside Paradise, is one of 17 properties I own. The dinner you're eating, the rooms you're staying in, the staff serving you, all of it belongs to me." Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, while Joseph stood frozen, pale as the linen tablecloths. I continued, my voice steady, rising with strength. "Over the past week, I've been humiliated, belittled, and treated like an employee by my own son and his wife. They've told you, their children, and anyone who would listen that I'm a delusional old woman who makes up stories of success just to feel important." I opened the folder and lifted the documents. "Here is the property deed for this hotel. Here are the corporate registrations. Here are the financial statements showing my total net worth over $46 million. And this," I said, holding up the final sheet, "is a record of every charge Joseph and Victoria have made using the credit cards I gave them." The room was silent. Even the children sensed the gravity of the moment. $1,156,000 in 6 months, I said clearly. Spa treatments, shopping sprees, luxury dinners, exclusive vacations, all paid for with my money, while they told everyone I was broke and living off their charity. Victoria's voice trembled. "Laura, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you screamed at my employees, calling me a maid. How you poisoned my grandchildren, telling them their grandmother was a liar and a burden. Or how you planned to throw me into a nursing home the moment I wasn't useful anymore." Joseph finally spoke, voice shaking. "Mom, we can fix this. It's just a misunderstanding." I turned to the son I had raised alone for 47 years. "No, Joseph, this isn't a misunderstanding. This is exactly what you wanted: a mother who gives endlessly, babysits for free, and never expects respect or love in return. You wanted someone to exploit without consequences." I pulled out my phone and dialed the number. "Detective Anderson, this is Laura Miller. I'm ready. Please come now." The response was swift and explosive. Victoria shot up from her seat, knocking over her glass of red wine, the spill spreading across the white tablecloth like a bloodstain. "You called the police?" she screamed, completely losing control. "You actually called the police on your own family?" "I called the police on people who committed fraud and exploited me," I replied calmly. "Blood ties don't exempt anyone from the law." Joseph stood as well, his hands trembling. "Mom, please think of the kids. They shouldn't have to see their parents arrested. You should have thought of them before teaching them to despise their grandmother," I said, my voice steady. "Before you decided that money mattered more than family." The guests began to stand, gathering their things, eager to escape the storm brewing before them. I didn't blame them. This wasn't their battle to fight. Victoria turned toward me, her voice breaking with fear. "You're making a terrible mistake. We're your family. You'll end up alone for the rest of your life if you do this." I looked at the woman who had destroyed the bond between me and my son, who had poisoned my grandchildren for 5 long years. For the first time in years, I felt complete peace. "Victoria," I said softly, "I've been alone for a long time. The difference is, this time it's by choice." Footsteps echoed down the hallway as Detective Anderson and his partner entered. Their presence shrank Joseph and Victoria from proud manipulators into cornered animals. "Mrs. Miller," the detective said gently, "are these the 2 individuals you wish to press charges against?" I looked at my son one last time, searching for a trace of remorse, a glimmer of the boy I once loved. But all I saw was pure hatred. The mask had fallen. "You're a bitter old woman," Joseph spat. "You're destroying this family over money." And in that moment, I knew I was absolutely right. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Michael had prepared the case so meticulously that Joseph and Victoria's attorney, ironically paid with my money, advised them to accept a plea deal to avoid trial. The charges of credit card fraud and financial abuse of an elderly person carried serious penalties, but the real blow was public exposure. A week after their arrest, the local paper ran the headline, "Miller Hospitality Group Uncovers Family Financial Fraud." The article told the story of a successful businesswoman exploited by her own son and daughter-in-law, turning it into a symbol of family betrayal. I gave no interviews, sought no attention. I didn't need to say a word. The truth spoke for itself. Joseph and Victoria were banned from every hotel under the Miller Hospitality brand. Their credit cards were canceled, their joint accounts frozen, and the mortgage payments I had been covering were stopped immediately. Within a month, they were forced to sell their house and move into a small apartment in the suburbs. But the financial loss was nothing compared to the social fallout. Word spread quickly among their circle. Their golf club membership, also paid for by me, was revoked. The private school where Luna and Edward studied tuition, also covered by me, demanded immediate payment for their outstanding balance or threatened expulsion. The so-called friends who had once shared cocktails at their parties suddenly had no time to call. I watched it all unfold from my penthouse, feeling nothing but relief. 3 months after that fateful dinner, I received a letter. The return address was from Joseph's new apartment. The handwriting shaky but familiar, it was Victoria's. Dear Laura, we hope you can forgive us for our mistakes. We've learned our lesson and only wish to make things right. The children miss you dearly. Joseph realizes now that he was wrong to let me come between you two. Please, give us a chance to be a family again. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it with the court files and police reports. It wasn't an apology, it was another attempt to manipulate me. The real Joseph, the man who called me a bitter old woman in front of the police, had already shown me exactly who he was. Victoria's letter only confirmed that neither of them had learned anything except that actions have consequences. I didn't reply. Instead, I began living the life I should have had all along. I sold off some smaller assets and used the money to create the Miller Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting elderly people who had been abused or abandoned. The foundation's office was on the top floor of my newest hotel in downtown Los Angeles. I worked with a passion I hadn't felt in years. The foundation quickly became the family I'd always longed for. Dr. Linda Parker, a geriatric specialist, became our medical director. She was like the daughter I never had. Attorney Samuel Hayes, our legal advisor, reminded me of the son I might have, had if Joseph had chosen integrity over entitlement. And Olivia Barnes, who led our support groups, was living proof of how people can rebuild after being betrayed by those they trusted most. Together, we helped dozens of elderly people reclaim their lives and dignity, offering financial counseling, legal aid, and, most importantly, a community that understood that true family isn't always the one you're born into. Although memories of Luna and Edward still ached, time had softened the pain. They were still young enough that I could hope their parents' venom hadn't left permanent scars. I set up a trust fund for their college education, managed by the foundation until they turned 18. If they ever came looking for me, ready to learn the truth, I'd welcome them with open arms. And if they didn't, at least they'd still have the future I once dreamed of for them. A year later, Amelia, now promoted to general manager, came to visit me. We sat on the penthouse balcony overlooking the bay. "Mrs. Miller," she said, "everyone at Seaside Paradise still remembers what happened that year. The way you stayed calm while they tried to humiliate you, it's something the staff still talk about with deep respect." I smiled, remembering Raymond and the others who had stood by me when no one else did. "They're good people," I said softly. Amelia nodded. "There's one more thing. Lately we've had a lot of guests asking about the foundation. Many of them are going through similar situations in their own families and wonder if the resort could host recovery programs." That conversation sparked our most successful project yet. Our Reclaim Your Life retreats quickly became week-long programs at Seaside Paradise, blending luxury accommodations with therapy sessions, legal consultations, and peer support groups. Elderly guests who had suffered emotional or financial abuse from their families could begin to heal in the very same place where I had rediscovered my strength. The irony was perfect. The dining hall where Joseph and Victoria had once plotted my humiliation became a space where survivors shared their stories and found their voices. The pool, where I had overheard their cruel plans, was now a sanctuary of renewal and fresh beginnings. But the most moving moment came 2 years after that confrontation. While reviewing applications for our scholarship program, one name made me freeze. Edward Miller, my grandson, now 13 years old. In his essay, he wrote that he wanted to study business administration and hotel management. Edward had researched my career and the Foundation's work, and his letter showed a maturity that took my breath away. "I know my parents did terrible things to you," he wrote in his neat adolescent handwriting. "I was too young to understand back then, but now I know the truth. I want to make it right somehow. I want to be someone who builds things, not destroys them like you." I sat motionless at my desk, tears streaming down my face as I read his words over and over. Edward hadn't done it for money or because anyone pushed him to. He had chosen to uncover the truth about his family on his own. That afternoon, I dialed the number he had left on his application. "Edward, it's Grandma." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, in a trembling voice, he whispered, "Grandma Laura, I wasn't sure you'd want to talk to me." "Sweetheart," I said, my voice breaking, "I've wanted to hear your voice every day for the past 2 years." We talked for nearly 3 hours that first call. Edward told me that Joseph and Victoria's marriage had fallen apart under the weight of financial strain and public humiliation. He mostly lived with his father now, a man who was finally starting to realize what he'd lost. "And Luna," he said, "she's still angry and confused, but she's starting to ask questions, too." I didn't push for reconciliation or demand apologies. I simply listened as he talked about school, friends, and dreams. When Edward asked if he could visit, I agreed without hesitation. The day he walked into my penthouse was one of the happiest days of my life. He was taller than I remembered, his dark brown hair the same shade as Joseph's, but his eyes held a gentleness I hadn't seen in my son for years. We looked through old photo albums together. I told him stories about his grandfather and the journey of building my company, the legacy that could one day be his, if he wanted it. "Grandma," Edward said as the sunset bathed the balcony in gold, "I feel bad for the pain I caused you. I was little, but I should have known better." I wrapped my arms around him, breathing in the faint scent of shampoo and the warmth of his steady heartbeat. "No, sweetheart. You've always been the good boy I hoped you'd become. None of this was ever your fault." Now, 5 years after that dreadful vacation, I wake up every morning in my beautiful penthouse with nothing but gratitude. Edward visits every weekend, works part-time for the Foundation, and is learning everything the way I once did. Luna has started calling me occasionally, and those tentative conversations give me hope. On my 77th birthday, Joseph sent me a letter. This time, it was a real apology, sincere and full of remorse. He didn't ask for money or forgiveness. He simply wrote that he hoped one day I might want to see him again. I haven't decided yet. The wound still runs deep, and trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But watching Edward grow into an honest, compassionate young man has shown me that redemption is possible even for those who once fell the farthest. Through him, I learned that Victoria had left the state, remarried, and cut ties with the family. Perhaps that's for the best. Some people are simply toxic, and the healthiest choice is to remove them from your life entirely. Seaside Paradise thrives under Amelia's leadership now, and the Foundation has helped more than 2,000 elderly people reclaim their lives with dignity. Sometimes I still stroll through the grand lobby that once made me feel small and powerless. But standing on those marble floors today, I no longer see a place of humiliation. It's the place where I stood tall again, where I learned that cruelty doesn't have to be tolerated just because it comes from family. The greatest lesson I've ever learned is that we teach people how they're allowed to treat us. For years I taught Joseph and Victoria that they could use me without consequence, that my love came without respect. Only when I set boundaries and demanded the dignity I deserved did everything begin to change. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but now at 77, I've never been happier. I'm surrounded by people who value me for who I am, not for what I can give. Every night, I sleep peacefully, knowing I'm loved and respected. Every morning, I wake eager for a new day. It took me far too long to understand that being alone isn't the same as being lonely, and sometimes the family you choose is far stronger than the one you're born into. Joseph and Victoria once thought they were teaching me a lesson when they tried to humiliate me in that hotel hall, and in a way, they did. That week, I learned that I am worth protecting even if I'm the only one willing to do it, and that lesson changed everything. Looking back, I realized the most valuable thing isn't wealth or reputation. It's the courage to set boundaries and protect yourself. Love within a family only means something when it comes with respect. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over bitterness. It took me years to understand that family isn't built from blood. It's built from honesty and kindness between people. If my story reminds you of someone in your life, someone who's hurt you, or someone you never got the chance to thank, maybe today is the day to do it. Do you think the line between love and letting go might just be the first step toward freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be the light someone else needs. And if you want to keep listening, learning, and finding strength in stories of family and forgiveness, stay with this channel. Every week, we'll walk through another journey of courage, reminding each other that everyone deserves love. But first, we must learn to love ourselves.